It's time for a model that comes in a very big box. The outer shipping carton says it's a Zoomlion machine, and we can see that the model, complete with all of its packaging, weighs nearly 9 kilograms. Here is the box taken out of the box, and we can see that this is the ZCC 9800W crawler crane, and it's in a scale of 1 to 50. The box has got a carry handle, and let's slowly ease it round and see what's on the other side. And there are some details about the functions of the model. There are a couple of QR codes, but they just take you to the general Zoomlion website. And out of the box we see there are the usual expanded polystyrene trays, and there's an instruction book that we'll see shortly. There are 2 trays which are factory sealed, and after a bit of knife work we can take the top lid off. And there we can see a whole number of parts, and they're mostly wrapped in soft paper. And if we go to the bottom tray, it contains more of the heavier parts of the model. So here is the crane out of the box, and there's masking tape on the winch drums. And the crawler tracks have a protective covering for shipping. It's quite tight, so really the only way to remove it is to cut it off. Overall, the packaging is of very good quality. Included with the model are model assembly instructions. It starts off right with an annotated version of the model and a set of parts, and then it goes through various assembly diagrams. Although the instructions are nice quality, they're not necessarily in a logical order, and an absolute beginner might struggle. And that's not helped by the fact that it also has some errors. In this section, the first thing to note is that the model can't be stripped down to form fully realistic transport loads. The counterweight trays are fixed, as are the crawler tracks to the frame. The erection cylinder is also a non-moving, non-functioning part. Out of the box, the boom sections are surprisingly heavy, and they are cast as U sections with a plate that's then screwed in to make the complete section. They certainly have a solid and robust feel. And other parts are also screwed in, including the mesh walkways, and also the Zoomlion signs. The various parts of the model do fit together well, and you secure the connections in the usual way using tiny brass nuts and bolts. Tools are provided for this, although annoyingly on the review model, the bolt head driver was just a shade loose fitting, so the bolt head was tending to spin around inside. But with patience you can join all the parts up, and the connections are robust enough. So now we fast forward and we've fully assembled the main boom, and that becomes a suitably massive piece of model. Next we have the back mast, and that is of slightly lighter construction. And then finally we have the luffing jib. The guy lines are riveted and permanently attached to the top section, so it's not easy to be flexible with different configurations. All of the winch drums have rope on, but the model does have to be reeved up, and we'll start with a moving frame that connects to the back mast. This requires 2 ropes to be fully reeved up, and both ropes are on the same winch drum, so care has to be taken to try and keep the rope lengths the same. To make the reeving easier, the back mast has been fitted, and we fixed a temporary strut to hold the moving mast in place. The reeving was then completed by doing one half first, and then pulling through the other half. There are trays on the carrier for fitting counterweights, and more can be loaded on at the back of the crane. Here you can see the ropes from the reeving that we've done, and they've not been permanently tied off, because as you wind in on the drum, you might get slight differences between each half, and so it's best to be able to pull the ropes through the tie-off points if you need to equalise the tension. Next we've done the reeving from the back mast to the luffing gear for the main boom. And as usual for these reeving operations, you have to be patient and slow, and be prepared to wash your mouth out when things go wrong and you use bad language. The crane cab can be moved around into the operating position, and this rotation is controlled by a ram and is nice and firm. There's some detail to add in terms of handrails, but these are loose and easily move out of position. Next we'll do what the manual describes as connecting moom to turntable, and we'll interpret that as connecting the boom to the turntable. As always, it's good to drift the connecting holes into place before inserting the screws. Next we can add a metal cover plate that fits over the top of the engine. And when we've joined up the luffing rope to the boom, we've got the crane configured with a main boom only. But unfortunately you can't fit the big hook block to the top of the boom head. So you have to make do with a single line block, and of course that doesn't really look right. Back down to the bottom of the model, and there's a couple of access stairways that can be added, but the instructions don't tell you where to put them. So the best place appears to be on the track frame, but the connection doesn't really work, you just have to rest it. Next we've added the fly jib and we need to reeve up the luffing rope, and again we've used temporary works to make the reeving easier. With the fly jib on, it's clear that the single line hook block goes on the rooster jib, and the manual tells you to reeve on the big hook block. But again, the double block doesn't look right because it's far too big. And unfortunately, it is modelled as a fixed double block and can't be split into two, which would be the right way to do it. Also, the single line block is huge compared to the size of a person. Starting with the track frames, and they have some decent detailing within the casting, although generally the model does not benefit from any tiny graphics. The crawler tracks are metal and the shoes have some detailing, and the access steps are plastic. The cab is a good looking part with textured mesh walkways, and there are metal handrails. There are plastic mirrors and the detail inside the cab is very good, and there's a fire extinguisher on the outside. The protection screen on top is plastic. Also plastic is the big engine, although that does mean it has a very good standard of detailing. There's a nice walkway down the side of the crane. There's an access ladder with wire grab rails, which are actually too thin. The counterweight blocks are well made with usable lifting lugs, and they've also got very good graphics with Zoomlion and 10 tons written on them. The superlift tray is a nice metal part. The guy rods on the crane have mostly riveted connections, so it's not easy to create different configurations. All of the pulleys on the model are metal. A nice aspect of the detailing on all of the boom and jib parts is the metal mesh walkways. One option you have for the boom and jib sections is to use them as transport loads, and they look pretty good mounted on a suitable heavy truck. But as we've already said, the main crane can't be split for transport. Looking at the crawler tracks, and they work well, and they can be easily rotated by hand. But there are no working rollers at all, and if we look underneath the track frames, it's just a smooth surface. The model does feature fold-out self-erection jacks, but they are solid plastic and non-functional. You can place the counterweights as you want them, including on the superlift tray, but for some reason the model just doesn't have enough of them, so you can't make a heavy lift configuration. As we've already seen, the crane cab does rotate, but it also tilts. But it relies on friction at the rivets to hold a tilt pose, and it can't really do that. Another working feature is the lift rams for the superlift tray, and by undoing a screw you can set the length of the piston. And this particular feature works quite well. Other features include the winch drums, which only have friction brakes, but notwithstanding that, let's try and give the crane a load to lift. And here we've got a giant head casing. In our configuration we've only got a single line hook, but this load suits the crane and it would be difficult to cap that. This is a big model, so let's get the tape out and do a dim check. And to the top of the main boom it's about 44 inches or 112 centimetres. And to the top of the fly jib it's 66 inches or 168 centimetres. It's nice to see a model of this Zoomlion 800-ton crawler crane. It's a heavy and robust model with some nice aspects of detailing, but it misses out in terms of flexibility and some of the features. A collector would probably want to replace the hooks with something sensible, and overall it looks nice and has enough to be rated as good.